What if I told you one of the biggest ADA lawsuits over the last decade started with a few late clock ins? Most businesses don't realize how thin the line is between holding someone accountable and a six-figure lawsuit. Today, I want to walk you through a real world ADA scenario, one that happens in businesses like yours every week. And I'll show you how our embedded HR team helped a client avoid a catastrophic misstep. Not with software, not with a hotline, but with real people asking the right questions at the right time. So, a few months ago, one of our complete HR clients, a distribution company with about 40 employees, reached out in frustration. One of the managers did, and basically their issue was a warehouse associate, we'll call him John, had been with the company for about a year, but he's now been clocking in late nearly every day. He's also missed 4 shifts over the last 6 weeks with very little notice. His manager was understandably fed up and was directed to give us a call to see if we could discuss it. He was ready to issue a final written warning and begin documentation for termination. But our embedded HRBP got on their weekly call. She paused. She said, "Has anything changed with John lately?" The manager mentioned offhand that John had shared something a week prior. He'd recently been diagnosed with diabetes and was having trouble getting his energy levels and schedule stable while adjusting to insulin. That's all he'd said. There was no formal request, there was no paperwork, just a casual comment in a stressful conversation when they discussed him being tardy. And it was the most important thing that that guy could say all day. Here's what we know and what most managers don't without training. Under the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, an employer has a legal obligation to engage in an interactive process where they become aware, whenever they become aware, formally or informally, that a medical condition may be affecting job performance. It's that simple. Medical condition affecting job performance equals interactive process. And no, the employee doesn't have to say the words, "I need a reasonable accommodation," or fill out an ADA claim request. They just have to let you know that they have a medical issue that may be affecting their job. In John's case, the moment he referenced that health condition impacting his schedule, the clock started ticking. Terminating him without engaging in that process is a lawsuit waiting to happen you will lose. Doesn't mean that the process is going to result in a different thing, but you have to go through it and you have to give it the true care that it deserves. These lawsuits are not hypothetical, they're the most common lawsuit under the EEOC. I've seen settlements for 1 or 2 year salary and others that were over $1 million. Not to mention legal fees, reputational damage, and the emotional toll on management, leadership, ownership. It's a bugger. So our HRBP didn't let it slide. So here's what we did, step by step, using our complete HR methodology. First, we initiated the ADA interactive process. Our HRBP coached the manager on how to open the door respectively. "Hey, John, you mentioned some health stuff going on. Are you doing okay? Is there anything we can do to support you at work?" You clarify the impact, not the diagnosis. The goal is not to play doctor. The goal is to understand how the condition affects essential job functions. In this case, in John's, punctuality and attendance in a safety sensitive environment is a big deal. So, we also went through a little bit of requested documentation. Since John's condition wasn't outwardly observable, we provided a standard medical cert form for his provider to confirm the need for accommodation. Don't need to know exactly all the details, but a doctor needs to say, "Look, this dude's going to be screwed up on sleeping. It's going to be very difficult for him, etc., whatever, or these sort of energy levels, etc." And then we explored the reasonable accommodation in an interactive process. John didn't need fewer hours. What he really needed was a predictable start time while he adjusted to new medication. That's the key that came from the process. What it normally comes with is talking with the employee and saying, "Hey, all right, you're on this new drug. It's screwing you up. What do you need in order to do your job? What's the putting forth great effort? I understand. But what can you do? What is it you want from us in order to keep you here? Because we have things to do and you have a job to do. So what is it you need?" And really, what he needed was a predictable start time. This particular organization moves around the start times a lot, as is necessary for their business needs. But it was available for them to temporarily adjust his shift start by an hour and coordinate with the supervisor on coverage and just kind of keep it stable for him to adjust. We documented the entire process. Every interaction, form, and change was documented in their portal and reviewed by the after each HR business partner call, and we worked with the manager. We coached the supervisor on how to maintain accountability within the ADA boundaries, how to track tardies going forward, when to check back in, and what crosses the line of that reasonable accommodation. That's embedded HR in action. It's not a software toggle, not a legal hotline, but a proactive human process to prevent risk and support employees. So let's pause and kind of level set this out. What exactly does the ADA require from employers? Covered employers are 15 plus employees. Now, that's federal. Most states have lowered that ADA requirement, some to as few as 5. Okay. So don't just think, oh, I've only got 7 employees. You got to check your state reg. But federally, 15 employees. The protected employees is anyone with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity or the history or perception of one of those major limits. So it's got to be an actual, like, big deal. Okay. In that case, the employer has the obligation to engage in the interactive process once aware of a potential disability. They need to consider and provide reasonable accommodations unless it causes undue hardship to the business. The larger the company, the harder it is to make the undue hardship argument. Okay. You got 15 employees, you've got one driver, you need a driver, the guy can't drive anymore. A reasonable accommodation is not, we don't have a driver. I understand that. That's an undue hardship on the business. But you still have to go through the process and see if there are other things you can do. You have to avoid retaliating or disciplining based solely off the effects of the disability completely. So, most violations happen not because of intentional discrimination, but because of untrained managers, reactive decisions, lack of documentation. It's like this is actually a relatively easy process, and the employer has a lot of rope in that undue hardship piece. They can really, they're not. The government is not requiring you torpedo your company. They're asking you to do things that are reasonable. So think back to John's case. If that manager had followed his gut and issued a termination, the employee might have filed an EEOC complaint. Company could have faced a costly legal defense. State agency might have looked at something or checked out an audit and an unemployment claim. And word would have spread internally and externally that this company punishes health disclosures. Even if the company ultimately prevailed, the damage would have been done and quite costly. And let's not forget the moral dilemma here. I mean, like, John wasn't looking for a free pass, he was managing a chronic condition and still trying to show up for work. A structured, empathetic approach helped him stay employed and get stabilized. So, here's some real accommodations we've helped implement. The truth is, most accommodations cost nothing or nearly nothing. Some examples: letting a recovering employee avoid closing shifts so they can attend a 12-step program, adjusting a workstation to avoid fluorescent lighting that triggered migraines, allowing light snacks at a desk for a diabetic employee even though they don't normally allow those things, modifying a uniform policy to allow orthopedic shoes, or, in the case of John here, resetting his schedule for consistency. He didn't get his hours cut in the end. It wound up being that they were able to keep him consistent and actually wound up relying on him more during that time because he kind of sometimes was in before everybody else, right? Or came in a little bit later and was out after everybody else. So it was a little bit of cost in that. But what it wound up being was that he wound up being so appreciative that he took control of a lot of things, wound up becoming a great employee. I mean, he was a great employee before all these issues, but by getting through this, he was able to return to that. These minor, reasonable accommodations that don't generate an undue hardship are excellent for company morale, for attracting and retaining good talent. It's a good thing to do. All of these kept employees productive and companies compliant without disrupting operations. We don't just respond to ADA issues at people processes, we build systems to prevent them. You got to have manager training, coach supervisors on how to recognize potential accommodations without violating privacy or creating risk. You got to look at leave administration, whether that's ADA, FMLA, state leave compliance. You need a unified process for that. Documentation systems. Our platform keeps audit trails, medical documentation, decision logs secure. And having that weekly HRBP check-in to surface these issues before they escalate with leadership is a big part of how this stuff works. That's what we mean when we say people processes can replace chaos with clarity. Most ADA problems don't come from blatant violations. They come from ignoring the process. They don't go through the iterative process. They just decide they can't. They also come from gray areas, a casual health comment that should have triggered the process but didn't, a performance issue that masks a disability. It's just a missed opportunity for leadership and managers to ask, is everything okay? What's going on? Before taking action. Your job as a leader isn't to know the law inside and out, but it is to have the systems and partners in place who do, and to keep you from violating these major issues. You don't have to know all the nuances, but you have to know that they exist and that you need a process to handle them. Because when you don't, you risk losing good people and opening the door to serious liability. So John stabilized his condition. He adjusted to his new routine, and in 3 months, he returned to his regular, kind of more variable shift. The supervisor regained a reliable employee, and John was very appreciative. The company kept its team intact and avoided a very large potential EEOC lawsuit. And perhaps most importantly, every manager at that company is now better trained, more aware, and more competent when the next gray area situation arises. That's leadership enablement. That's HR done right. If you're not sure whether your managers would have caught what John did, if your leave process is duct tape between payroll, operations, HR, finance, if you're just one innocent mistake away from a major compliance crisis, download our free resource, ADA Accommodation Process Checklist, at the link in the description below. Or better yet, if you're a US based business with 10 plus employees, book a free 30-minute consult with me. I'll walk you through your current leave, look at the accommodation process, and see what the gaps are. Because when it comes to ADA, you don't get points for good intentions. You get judged on your process and your documentation. And our job is to make sure that the process protects everyone, your people, your managers, and your company. Thanks for listening to Don't HR Alone. I'm Rhamy Alejeal. Stay compliant, stay competent. Until next time, go out there and get your work done. Talk to you soon.